sure they could have.
That's not an estimate.
Aye.
We know that for sure. It's what it costs.
As I say, when I was sitting in the building myself, what they did is they took the windows out from above me, and it was like wire mesh they put in. So it meant when we were heating our house, we were £20 a day heating the way it worked out. So in the total eight year, we spent £49,000, £856. That's what we spent in heating alone. And the council knew, we kept telling them, and they just kept ignoring us.
And we're talking about Charles Price's 17 million and various other figures. You went in the case of you know, the Trump thing, where I'm not going regardless.
No.
You would have gone for a fair price to buy an equivalent house elsewhere. So how much discretionary payment do you think we're ultimately talking about, brass tacks, for you to buy the equivalent house that you would have wanted?
Well, there was a house in Rutherglen, I say, there's a house in Rutherglen, it was 120,000, exact same as mine.
So the 90,000 and a £30,000 discretionary payment?
See the 90,000, I've only been offered 30,000 up to 10 weeks ago. I was never offered 90,000.
Yeah, I was just looking at figures.
£90,000 I got offered in writing 10 weeks ago, but when you take all my legal stuff, now the £90,000 that they're offering now is all my legal stuff's to come off that. So I'm not going away with 90,000. I'll be lucky when you take that, I've spent gas and electric off it straight away. I'll be lucky if I'm going away with 90,000.
And the council's undoubtedly at a loss over the whole time.
I'll not be going away with anything, because by the time everything's home, that's it. Now they're saying they're going to pay all your legal fees under compulsory purchase, and now they're saying no, just take that out of your 90,000. It's just, and they sent me a letter saying, where is your title deeds? I says, I've got my title deeds. He says, because we need them so we can finish off our master plan. I said, that's all right, when you pay me my money, you get my title deeds. So I'm still sitting with my title deeds, and they're still waiting for them.
One of the outcomes of this, which is not a solving outcome for Margaret, but one of the things that we're working on at the moment, Margaret and Sheena Sweeney, who's here, who's also been on the receiving end of a CPO, also in the East End, but not to do with the Games Village, and Tom Short, who's left the room, and others of us, and myself, have set up a new campaign called The Right to Stay Put, using the title comes from Chester Hartman, who's a US planner, and the title comes from the notion that arising out of the urban renewal programs in the US through the 1960s and 1970s, people were basically saying, you know, we have a right to stay, we have a right to benefit from the regeneration that comes, we should not be displaced. So we've set up a little campaign called The Right to Stay Put. It's about regeneration for people, not moving people on. It's an anti-eviction, anti-displacement campaign. So if you'd like to get involved, I'm happy to talk to anybody afterwards. I'll see Margaret or Sheena, who's just here as well, who are involved. Okay. We're going to close that bit now and move to part two. Is that all right?
We don't have a film, unfortunately, yet.
We don't have a film proper, so I thought we'd just introduce the accord and its backstory, and then I'll try and do a little kind of question and answer session, and then that will hopefully evolve into some discussion about the state of the Accord Centre. Just as a bit more backstory on the Accord and the Games in general, many people ask, the reporter was just asking me before about this idea of the legacy of Games type events, and we hear about this a lot, but, particularly with Olympic Games, but we've heard about it a lot in relation to Glasgow's Commonwealth Games, is what the legacy will be. This word legacy comes up an awful lot. The legacy idea or phenomenon related to Games type events really came about since the kind of Barcelona model, I think, of Olympic Games. And the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, now has a sort of special part of its bidding process that's all about the legacy and what the legacy will distribute to the city, to the host city of any one Games event. And the same kind of thinking has been rolled over into the Commonwealth Games, such that the idea of a legacy, a benefit, a long-lasting benefit from a Games event should be intrinsic to the bidding process for host cities who are, or potential host cities who are wanting to host these events, and should be one of the kind of spin-offs that comes out of that. So if you go back and look at the candidate city files, it's called, that Glasgow put into as part of its successful bid for the 2014 Games, you'll see a lot about legacy, what this thing will deliver. And it mentions things like new roads, the East End Regeneration Route is mentioned, things like the velodrome and the National Indoor Sporting Arena, or whatever it's called, NISA, the Athletes Village and the new housing, and of course it doesn't count the old housing that's been knocked down and the people that have been displaced. We conveniently pretend as if it was a blank piece of land to begin with. All of that's mentioned in the bidding process, and you may cast your minds back a couple of years to when legacy was being talked about in the sort of council rhetoric about the Commonwealth Games. There was a lot of talk about legacy plans were produced, there's a legacy strategy, there are sort of 5 points to it, I can't remember exactly what they are, greener and smarter and fairer, and all those kinds of motherhoody statements that these things usually have in them. And the Scottish Government has a legacy strategy as well. Part of the legacy for Glasgow was supposed to be, because legacy, by the way, is never statutory, it's never a required part, it's the bit that slips off the back of the truck, so to speak, as soon as the going gets tough and the bills get too high. But nonetheless, there it is. Part of the legacy for Glasgow's Commonwealth Games was supposed to be a new centre, purpose-built centre for adults with learning disabilities to replace what is currently known as the Accord Centre, just around the corner from where Margaret lives and across the road from the Shopkeepers on Springfield Road in Dalmarnock. The Accord Centre's been there for, what, 20 years? 30 years? Delivering a custom service to adults with learning disabilities and their carers as respite. It's been the community and the social network, the home, the place where you go to meet friends for these people for that length of time. It's a really, really important service. The Accord Centre is due for demolition at some point, eventually, in order to, wait for it, make way for a bus park for the folks who will arrive to participate in the Commonwealth Games. It needs to be demolished early, we're told, because the organising committee of Glasgow's Commonwealth Games needs to house its offices there. So they need the land well before they need it for the bus park because they want to house the people who are organising the Commonwealth Games in this building, this purpose-built building that is specifically designed for adults with learning disabilities. So you should be asking questions now about how this kind of process could come about in our city. That was part of the legacy, though, was that the Accord Centre would be rebuilt in a fine and upstanding new building with great facilities and great services. Indeed, people came to talk to you, didn't they, early on, to consult on how it would look and what service would be provided. £250,000 was set aside for that building to be built and refurbished to the appropriate specifications, and then of course that money was cut from the budget. Possibly as part of escalating Commonwealth Games costs, who could say? It's too difficult to follow the paper trail and the money trail, but nonetheless the budget was cut, and the Accord Centre users and their carers, such as Mary and Helen here, were told there will be no new centre because there is no money. What we're going to do is to farm out your loved ones to community centres all around the city, and these are not purpose-built facilities, they're just community centres that are going to be used as kind of drop-in places for people to go to. So that sense of community would be lost, and the appropriate facilities would not be there to care properly for people who have, some of whom have quite severe learning disabilities. So the Accord, users of the Accord Centre and the carers of the users of the Accord Centre said, no, we don't think that's right. We're going to dig our heels in too. And certainly I was really pleased to meet Helen and Mary and also Grace, who couldn't be with us today, when they turned up at Margaret's window the day she was barricading herself in, and said, we're here to stand beside you, and hey, down the road we're going through a similar kind of process, not for our homes, but for this really important service. And we're here to stand beside you. And since then, the carers of the Save the Accord Centre as a campaign has become quite famous within Glasgow. These people speak very regularly at all sorts of events around the city and are very involved in the wider anti-cuts movement, because of course this is part of what it is. And still haven't been resolved yet as to what will happen. We're sort of in limbo. So I thought I might just ask you guys a few questions. There's a bit of backstory. Ask you guys a few questions, and then you can chip in with some discussion as we go. So maybe you can tell us about what you were originally promised and how the kind of story unfolded. What you thought you were going to get as the legacy for the Awards Centre.
Actually, at a meeting that was never actually. I was going to be talking about STS, self-directed support, but it says we didn't really need to take this right. This was like 3 years ago, and we were talking about that and all kinds of things. And then when we got the games, it kind of changed. We were saying we had to take self-directed support in the penny fair play, right? And we were bringing back a meeting. Oh, wasn't it? Was it Frank?
Jim Coleman?
No.
I was there at the time, sorry.
A politician.
Politician.
He was there to tell us not to worry. He went, the
250k.
and I know it's not a lot to do, but that's there and we'll get the rest of the money and whatnot. And I asked him then to give it in writing, because somebody might get it in writing. He says, you don't need it in writing in the minutes of this meeting, which we can't get it. And then just for them, and it's just went from bad to worse.
Aye, 4 years ago we were promised a legacy for the Commonwealth Games. Then just before Christmas, October last year, they sent a letter saying no legacy for learning disabilities from the Commonwealth Games, which was quite shocking, because there is a couple, 2 clients, 2 service users that use the accord that are in Special Olympics. So we all got together and decided, no, this is not on. They had the parents and carers for the Accord Centre designing the inside of the building. And Matt Feynman, who was at NHS at the time, and Jim Coleman had came to get all the designs of the inside of the building that we would like, you know, for the legacy for the Commonwealth Games. One of the parents handed it over, took weeks to draw out and colour in. He just rolled it up and put it in his pocket and shouldn't have right something right. Then October last year they came back and says no legacy. So got together and we went, no, we're not having this. We're not going to sit down to this. So writing letters there and there. And then so happens one night we're just driving along the road, we were going to see the local councillor, Mr. Edmund. And we got to Springfield Road and we went, no, we'll go down and see Margaret. And it was the best thing we'd done, because the fight she had in her, and we says, no, we're not going to win. We're going to stand up here and fight. If all this money's coming into this area, our Wains deserve something. And we're still fighting, and we're not going to win. We're not going to win. Like Margaret's, like the area, they've gradually run down the Accord Centre. Gradually. The doctor and the Accord Centre share the same roof space. The doctor's office is beautiful, not one hospital. Whereas if you get into the Accord Centre, you need to wear a hat because it's raining inside it. They have gradually ran down the building, and they're coming back to us saying, I've got a centre for you, the local community centre at Barfield. It's a community centre for the local community. It's not equipped for people with special needs. So we're saying no, and they keep saying aye, but we're not having it, we're not going to wait. Every day we harass them, either with letters or we're in George Square, or, you know what I mean, we're out doing something. Because my parents were worried about the future. We want our children settled. Because of their learning disabilities, they're not getting any younger, they're getting older, and the illness, there's going to come in illnesses. Down syndrome people can get early Alzheimer's between their late 20s and their 30s. They can get Alzheimer's, and this is what we're worried about.
Why is it important to have a dedicated centre, so it's not just community centres? Can you tell us about what this centre in particular gives your kids?
It's hard to explain for people that haven't got anybody with learning disabilities. It's hard to. It's their own community, but it's their pals, and when they're all together, all right, you might not understand what they're talking about, but see when they're all together, they can understand each other. They bounce off of one another, and it's great. I mean, they're happy. They're a community. why should they not have this, you know what I mean? It's like them going to their work every day, they're going in to meet their friends and enjoy themselves and have a right good day and then coming back in. And it's very important for the carers as well, because it's respite for them.
I mean, saying that, some of the carers are 70, 80 and 90s. And some of them don't even realise it's happening. We did get some, they can't attend meetings and that, some of them's housebound. And it's really ridiculous that they have a spirit. We're not talking about wee kids in this centre for men and women in the 40s and 50s. It's went there. Well, actually 30 years because they moved to somewhere else, didn't they? So it has been there a long time and it's still on. And it's very difficult for somebody to live in that. It's just going, you're not going there, you're going. And some of these complaining that their behaviour's changed because there's a word about it. Some of them's fear to go into another centre in case they're not going to the rain centre tomorrow.
And they'll not be taking out this centre. The Glasgow City Council, social work Glasgow City Council will only be hiring a couple of rooms in it for an hour in the morning and an hour in the afternoon. So there'll be no base there at all if it's bad weather or anything like that. There'll be nothing there.